What's up, guys? Welcome to today's video. This is going to be the only Airbnb training that you ever need to watch in 2026. I'm going to teach you every single step of the way based on the 2026 rules because Airbnb has changed in 2026. The old rules no longer apply if you want to succeed. So what you're going to learn is exactly how to go from zero, every single step, all the way until 5, 6, or even 7-figure business with short-term rentals. If you don't know who I am, my name is Almahdi. I have a multiple 7-figure Airbnb portfolio as a super host. I've done over 7 figures on the platforms, and I'm going to teach you exactly what got me there. And most importantly, stick until the end. I'm going to be sharing the new strategy that very few people know that has allowed me to continue being profitable while so many other hosts have been struggling with how the game has completely changed. So make sure you have your pen and paper. Make sure you take a bunch of notes. So let's get right into it. So number one, let me move this out of the way. Number one is market or property research. So what exactly is your market and property research? The first thing you need to do is figure out where you want to do Airbnb and exactly what the details of that market are. So what do I mean? Are short-term rentals permitted? So number one, right here is your regulations, meaning, do they allow short-term rentals? Yes or no? And you can do a quick Google search. You can type in any city or town that you're looking to do Airbnb in. And even Airbnb, you can type in the city or town and it will tell you exactly what the rules, laws, regulations are for short-term rentals. So make sure you stay away from cities or towns where it's banned or restricted, of course. Otherwise, you won't be able to do it in a compliant way, which you absolutely should not do. And focus on the areas where short-term rentals are permitted. Okay, so that's number one. Don't even start looking for property. Don't do any of the future steps that I'm going to share with you here until you make sure short-term rentals and Airbnb are permitted. And in addition to that, you can even do some extra research to make sure there's nothing as far as them trying to ban or restrict or put any sort of regulations around Airbnb that would prevent you from doing short-term rentals. So that's number one. Number two, once you do find a city or a town where you want to pursue Airbnb or short-term rentals, then you're going to go to what is called AirDNA.co. So AirDNA is just going to be one of the tools, one tool, which is basically a software online that you can use either the free version or if you want the subscription-based version that gives you much more details about a certain city, town, properties, how much they're generally running in revenue. And you can start typing in addresses, search properties, towns, cities, anything like that, and you can look up different metrics about them, like occupancy rate. So the occupancy rate, which is essentially, on average, how occupied are properties in that area on a short-term rental basis. And then another metric is very important, is your nightly rate. Okay, so occupancy rate, you want to stick around 65% plus. Nightly rate, one of the things that I talk about is you can do Airbnb on apartments, you can do short-term rentals for apartments, for single-family homes, you know, whether it's studio, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bedroom, it doesn't matter. The strategy that I like to teach and what I do with my business is I like to stick with single-family homes. And again, the more bedrooms, the better, because then you can house more people. Airbnb is very much a game about how many guests you can get into your property so that you can house them, they can all have a good time. And by the way, the more people that you can have in there, think about it, the bigger the group, the more that they can split the nightly rate. And then that way you make more money, and then it costs less for that family or the multiple families that can fit in the property. So what I teach my students is to stick with properties that are on the 3, 4 bedroom plus, but you can also start with apartments. Just keep in mind, you would need more units to be profitable and actually make enough money that it makes a difference in your life, right? So AirDNA, you're going to do a lot of research there. It's going to give you the occupancy rates. If you type in a city or town, it's going to give you the nightly rates, many other metrics in there, by the way, which we're going to get right into a module. I show you exactly how to use AirDNA right now in just a moment. So right before we jump into that, I just want to cover this because once we get through AirDNA, then we're going to get to the next steps. But keep in mind, AirDNA is just one tool. Then you're also going to want to go on Airbnb and look up those properties in those particular areas and do a search and compare the data that you found on AirDNA with the properties that you're finding on Airbnb and make sure it makes sense. You're going to reconcile the two, okay? So you don't only want to rely on AirDNA, and you also want to use that information to go on Airbnb and then pretty much triage that information. Reconcile it against what you're finding on AirDNA and what you're seeing on Airbnb to double and triple check that the properties that you're finding are going to work for you in your business. So now that you know exactly how to do your property and market research using AirDNA, Zillow, Google, all of these different tools, what I want you to focus on and think about is what strategy you are going to enter with. Now, what I mean by strategy specifically is, are you going to do Airbnb rental arbitrage, which let's just get right into that. Rental arbitrage or also known as rent to rent, is a great way to enter Airbnb without buying the property, okay? So I'm gonna talk about purchasing in just a little bit because I encourage everyone to end up building cash flow using arbitrage or other strategies I'm gonna share with you in this video so that you can build up your cash flow and eventually invest by purchasing property so that you can get all the advantages. But we'll get into that in a minute. So rental arbitrage is where you find a property on Zillow, as I shared with you just a bit ago, and you find a landlord that's listed for 12, 18 months, you lease the property from them, and then you sublease it on all of the platforms that I'm going to share with you later in this video. So some of those are Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, okay? Those are the three most common short-term rental platforms that you're going to be taking advantage of. And the way this works is, let's say your property that you find on Zillow is $3,000 a month for the rent, okay? And let's say you've got another $1,000 in expenses every month. So your cable, your internet, your utilities, pool, all of that. That's $1,000 per month. So what you have here in expenses, you have $4,000 a month in expenses, okay? So what you're gonna do is, once you've spoken to the landlord, and by the way, you need a script to do that, and how to pitch the landlord is very, very important. If you wanna learn exactly how to do that, we can't cover that on this video. It'll take quite a bit of time. So you can feel free to reach out to me. Click the link in the description if you wanna work with me, and I will show you exactly what the script is that I've used and my students use to secure properties. So you've got $3,000 in rent, $1,000 monthly expenses, and about $4,000 total in expenses. And what you would then do is list the property on all the different platforms, Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, and others that I'm going to share with you. You should be able to net at least $6,000 plus per month. So in income. So what does that leave you on average? Let's call it $2,000 or more in profit. Okay? So very, very simple. You rent the property from the landlord, you sublet it, and then you get your income after you pay your expenses on a monthly basis. And this, in a nutshell, is Airbnb arbitrage. So it's a great way for you to start your Airbnb journey as a complete beginner and build up multiple properties and start cash flowing and eventually be able to purchase a property, okay? So that covers the first strategy. The second strategy that you can use if you have very low to no capital to start on Airbnb is what is called Airbnb management or co-hosting or co-listing. It's got many names. So co-listing / co-hosting. Really, it's Airbnb management. Okay, and how Airbnb management works is you'll find a property, again, similar to what I shared with you on, using AirDNA and Zillow to find those properties. And what you're going to do is reach out to the landlord, and the landlord already has their property listed for rent. And what you can do is ask for a percentage to manage their property on short-term rental websites. So, for example, you find a landlord that has a property listed for, let's say, $5,000 a month, already on Zillow, right? This is the rent. And what you're able to do is actually generate them 2 to 2.5x, 2 to 2.5x on a short-term rental basis. So they should be able to generate, or you should be able to generate for them, if you follow these procedures right, about $10,000 a month on the short-term rental platforms. Okay? So if you're able to generate them $10,000, let's say a month, and you would just charge them 20%, typically between 15 and 30%, but 20% is the average for managing their property on Airbnb, setting up all their listings, managing the guest flow, automating this process. So they're actually earning more because you can generate more income for them on short-term rentals, and you would generate your 2K in this case, 20%. 20% of 10,000 is $2,000 a month profit to you. And did you have to buy the house? Nope. No risk to you. You didn't have to get a lease. You didn't have to rent it for 12 months. Nothing. And essentially have no startup costs, right? So this is a great way, if you don't have capital, to start and accumulate properties. And again, build out your book of business so that eventually you can get the cash flow to go purchase a property. All right, which is going to lead me to the next strategy. It's not really a strategy, but a way to run a business on Airbnb is, of course, to own or buy your short-term rental. Now, what are the advantages and benefits to owning your short-term rental? Number one is, in no particular order, cash flow. So again, if you've done your research, you've got into a property that is going to positively cash flow you, right? Very, very important that you do the research correctly and don't get into an investment that does not positively cash flow you, okay? Number two is tax benefits, which you could argue are the most powerful tool in short-term rentals, right? There's something called the short-term rental loophole, which, since you're managing your property for a certain number of hours, allows you to qualify for much larger deductions. So at the end of the year, you can write off all those expenses against your income, okay? So I'm not a CPA, but make sure you reach out to your CPA or a tax strategist, and they will break down all of the details for you as far as how the short-term rental loophole works. Short-term rental loophole. It's actually not a loophole. I know it's called that, and the internet's kind of been floating that term over, but it's not a loophole, guys. It's a guideline in the IRS tax code. So go check that out. Huge, huge tax saving that you can get from owning a short-term rental property. Okay, so make sure that if you're purchasing your property or looking to get into Airbnb and you can afford to buy one, I would go ahead and do that because it's going to massively reduce your tax bill if you know what you're doing. Okay, and number three is the appreciation. Okay, / equity gain. So when you hold the asset, any property, over time, again, if you've done your right research and you buy in the right place, over time, you are building wealth through the appreciation and the equity that you're building, whether you force that equity gain and appreciation by doing renovations and enhancing the value of the property, or just over time, it's going to increase, right? Historically, real estate appreciates over time, and there's more appreciation if you know exactly where you're looking, and that particular area, if you've done the right research, should be appreciating in a very steady manner for you to be building your wealth. So these are the three main reasons that I encourage everybody to eventually be able to purchase and own short-term rentals. Massive advantages if you do so. Okay, so let's get into the next steps and why we meaning myself and my students, have been able to maximize profitability, whether you're doing rental arbitrage or own the property or even co-listing, right? So what you want to do is, when it comes to your listings, right, there's going to be multiple websites that you're going to list your property on. And there is a fourth platform that isn't just short-term rentals, but also covers mid-term rentals. All right. So that's what I'm going to share with you in just a moment. But before we get to that, what I want to do is focus on the next step. Once you've done your research, once you've selected one of the properties, the very next thing you need to do is understand amenities and designing the property. Amenities and design. So this, after your market research, and they're pretty much hand in hand, because one of the things that you're doing when you're doing your market research is actually looking for properties that have top tier amenities. And what you're going to do is be able to design or implement a design in that property when it comes to your furnishing and how everything is laid out. And the way you make pretty much all your profit, all your money, and how you stand out in 2026 is hands down the amenities that you have in your property. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Primarily outside in the backyard. Okay, you need a pool. Let's list some of these out. In most markets, I'm talking pool, spa, pickleball courts, pickleball. Oops. Basketball. Arcade games, volleyball, etc. These are the kind of amenities that you need in your backyard. A movie theater room inside, but mostly on the backyard is what will sell your property, because that's what people come, especially in groups, to an Airbnb to do, is to enjoy the properties on that level. They want to be outside. They want their kids to be having fun. They want to be playing pickleball. They want to be playing volleyball. They don't want to have to leave the property, right? Many reviews that I get because of what I've implemented in my backyards with all these sorts of amenities is that they didn't even need to leave the property during their whole stay, right? Unless they were there for a particular event or some other reason, there's plenty for them to do at the properties to the point that they don't need to leave. That is how you are going to dominate in 2026. And it's almost become the barrier to entry. You need to have some of these for you to be able to compete, okay? And when you do have these, then you're very well positioned to be able to make top dollar in your market, okay? So amenities and design. When it comes to design, you also really need to understand whether you're hiring a designer or having an eye yourself for getting that furniture in there. You need to just pay attention. And what I call, there's a concept of duplicating but enhancing at the same time. So seeing what works in your market, but make it a little bit nicer at the least. You don't want to be like everybody else. You want to stand out and you want to have the best amenities, the best design, and you can immediately tell by looking at the listing, okay? So that is, by the way, we're jumping around here, but since step number one was market research, that's really, this. Let's just call this number two. Okay, so once you've chosen a property that either has the ability to have these implemented or developed in them, or it already has some of these, like a pool, a spa, usually a house will have those built in, you at least want to be able to add them if you don't already have the amenities there. When it comes to pickleball, you're going to have to build that if it's not already there. Houses typically don't unless you're buying an Airbnb already. You're probably going to have to build a pickleball court, which is something I've done. But typically a pool or a spa, the property comes with a pool or a spa, unless, again, you're starting from complete scratch and building one. Same thing with basketball. When it comes to the games and the amenities that you can have, you can buy chessboards, you can buy all of these smaller amenities, a hammock, pool tables, ping pong, putt-putt, like mini golf. You can do all of that. Make sure the properties that you either are purchasing or renting for rental arbitrage, that they have these built-in amenities for you to be able to already start at a certain level, okay? So that's enough for the amenities and the design. The next step that you need to focus on is, once you've already got these items in place, then you're going to want to focus on furnishing the property, right? So where are you going to find the furniture? So if you're doing rental arbitrage, typically your furnishing cost is going to be, for like a 3-bedroom, you're looking at about $10,000 to $12,000 to furnish a 3-ish bedroom property, okay? The more bedrooms, the bigger the property, the more amenities you're putting outside, of course, that can increase your budget. Another pro tip, if you're doing rental arbitrage, is finding properties that are already furnished, so that all you're doing is adding those nice accent pieces, a nice couch, focusing on the backyard, putting your budget into the yard. Those are the most important things for you to look out, because if you don't need to furnish it already, assuming it's nice furniture, right, more modern style, contemporary furniture, you can save quite a bit of money doing that. Just expect the rent on that property might be a little bit higher. It all comes down to how you negotiate. So for those of you that have worked with me in the past, my students that I worked with one-on-one, they understand that we spend a lot of time on understanding how to approach the landlord and how to have that conversation from a business perspective, so that you can actually negotiate a lot of concessions and save a bunch of money up front, keep it in your pocket, based on how you negotiate, okay? So, by the way, if you are interested and serious in learning exactly how to do this and want one-on-one guidance and mentorship, I do work with a handful of students every single month on a one-on-one basis. I don't do group sessions. This is more tailored to every single person, and that's why I only work with a few people every single month. You can click the link in the description, apply to see if you qualify to work with me, and I will reach out to you if you do. I teach you every single step of the way and handhold you through it. Part of that is actually the landlord script and understanding how to negotiate exactly what to say to secure those properties very, very easily, honestly, as long as you find the right type of properties, okay? So that can save you a tremendous amount of money. So with that out of the way, let's get back to furnishing. You need a professional furnished property. Okay, the way your property looks and how nicely furnished and how nicely designed it is again very important, because more and more people are professionally approaching Airbnb, like myself, like the people that I work with. No longer can you just throw in any furniture and it looks okay and then you're going to get booked. Those people are going to not do they're not going to do well, right? So we want to maintain professionalism, having furniture very, very nicely set up, designed, and make everything really pop and look really good. So furnishing your property is the next step. Once you've done that, you want to get all of the furniture sent to the property and give yourself about 2-ish or so weeks so that you can order all of that furniture. You can get pieces from, Amazon is a great place, Wayfair, okay? These are just a couple where you can get some pretty nice furniture that, you don't have to break the bank with, and you don't need to go to these extremely high-end, expensive places. What you need to do is find furniture that looks very nice and is good quality, but not the top dollar where you're going to break the bank. You do not need to do that. It's all in your eye in how you get something that looks very nice and looks very quality, but doesn't necessarily have to be that, crazy costing couch, right? You can find something moderate that still looks really good, that doesn't basically burn your entire budget. And that's the smart way to approach Airbnb. Okay, which brings me to my next step. Once you've furnished and staged the property, the next step is your photography. Okay, so how do you find and where do you find a photographer, and how important is photography? Number 4 is Okay. So your photography also very, very important, because guess what? Your photography is basically your marketing. So a great place for you to find your photographer is Thumbtack. Okay? Thumbtack is an app and website where you can just go find freelancers, and what you're going to do is reach out to multiple photographers in that particular area, which you can just look up on Thumbtack and ask them for a portfolio of their business, right? What have they done? How have they photographed other properties? Find real estate photographers, and specifically photographers that have done Airbnb, okay? You're going to want two types of photos, which your photographer should be very familiar with. You're going to want daytime and twilight. A third bonus that you definitely also want to use, especially if you have a nice backyard, which you should to compete in today's game, is drone shots. Okay? So a drone photo is really going to showcase your entire backyard, all the amenities, all in one photo. And make sure you have a good photographer, because they're going to know exactly what type of angles, whether it's from straight up the top facing down, whether it's angled depending on the property and the curb appeal. They should know exactly how to do this. And the way you're going to vet them is ask them for their book of business and just see which ones have the nicest Airbnb photos. You're going to see really cool photos of different properties that they've shot, and you should be able to tell, wow, these are top quality. And once you compare it against 3 or 4 other photographers, you're going to know exactly who you should go with. Okay? So as soon as you complete the previous step, number 3, which was furnishing, and then you stage the property, you're going to have your photographer come out. Another thing that you can find, which, by the way, hiring your cleaner is that your staff, right? Let's get right into that, because they're actually going to help you set up, let's say, hiring staff, which is basically your cleaners, pool maintenance, and landscaper if you have a backyard. Landscaper. So once you've ordered your furniture and you've hired your photographer and you've planned it so that as soon as your staging is done, your furniture has been built, which again, all those you can find on Thumbtack. Your cleaner, by the way, once you hire them and they come to clean the property before you get your photography done, they can help you stage the property. You're going to pay them a little bit extra, but they're going to help you stage the property so that you're setting the table, putting all the games out. They're, of course, going to clean the property thoroughly. And by the way, that way you're also going to see how well they do cleaning, right? So similar to the previous step, Thumbtack is where you want to find your cleaner. And just like with the photography, you're going to ask multiple cleaners, and then you're going to make sure that they've done Airbnb cleanings, because Airbnb cleanings are very particular. Your Airbnb cleaners are looking out for if anything was damaged, telling you, kind of giving you an update on the previous guests. They're going to take photos before they start cleaning and after they clean, so that you can document anything that the guests did or didn't do, that they should have done or shouldn't have done. And they're almost like your property manager, right? So your cleaners, you need to have an amazing relationship with. And that's something that you should not overlook. Don't cheap out on your cleaners, but also, of course, keep it moderate with how much you're spending. Make sure you have a great relationship with your cleaner, because they're going to function, again, almost like your property manager for your properties. They're your eyes on the ground. Okay? So that's the next step. And then once you've got your cleaners and your whole staff, same thing with pool maintenance, by the way, landscapers, make sure that you have all of those pieces in place. You can find them on Thumbtack. And by the way, a key for hiring is once you hire, and especially if they're in the business, once you hire one, they should know others. For example, if you hire a really good cleaner that already does Airbnb, sometimes they know a good handyman. Sometimes they know a good pool person. And that way you build your team quickly based on trust and top quality. Okay, so that's another pro tip for you. So once you've got that out of the way, you've got your photos, then it comes to your listing and building out your listings. So I'm going to go through, let's see, your listings. And platforms. Okay, so this is where we're going to start talking a little bit about the hybrid B&B model strategy, which is exactly, again, as I've mentioned in the beginning of the video, how I've been able to keep top profitability and also share with my students to do the exact same thing while so many hosts are struggling because of more competition. If you have the right strategy, you don't need to worry about that because you know how to find alternatives to only sticking to one platform, okay, or two platforms that everybody else is doing. So what I want to explain to you is once you've got all that information, or once you've got, your furnishing, you've staged the property, you've taken the photography, now you just have to list your properties on the platforms. So what are the main platforms? Of course, we have Airbnb. You're going to make accounts for all of these, by the way. And VRBO, Booking.com. These are the main short-term rental sites, STR. And they're very straightforward, right? Once you create accounts, you pretty much follow the prompts. You create listing titles, listing descriptions, which, by the way, you want to use ChatGPT or Google, but especially ChatGPT right now, right? This is 2026. And prompt it to create a description based on the property, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, the city you're in, and all the landmarks that are in the area, and have it pretty much tell you exactly what the description is going to be. So you basically say, ChatGPT, you open the prompt. Let's say your property is in Birmingham, Alabama, right? I'm just making that up. You're going to say, create an Airbnb listing description for me that explains exactly the landmarks, the distances I am from them. My property is a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom with all of these different amenities. You're going to list them out. And then once you hit enter, it's going to give you a very thorough, robust listing description. You want your description to paint a nice picture and an experience for the guest and list out every amenity that you have in the property. Okay, so very straightforward. You're going to do that for all of the listings. And this is for the short-term rentals. What I'm about to tell you is the hybrid model. Okay, so again, these are short-term rental websites for the most part. Yes, you can book longer-term stays on them, but they're mostly for short-term stays. The strategy that I want to share with you for 2026, the hybrid model, is hybrid B&B model. Nobody is teaching this, but this again is exactly how I've been able to maintain peak profitability, even in what the slower seasons are for many hosts. Okay, so what you need to understand is once you're running your business, and depending on the different cities you're in, different cities have different seasonality, okay? And using AirDNA, by the way, it can show you that seasonality. For example, maybe based on the climate that you're in, most people travel to your property and your town for the first 6 months of the year. Let's say January through June, okay? And then from maybe July to the end of the year, there's not so much demand. Maybe it's 2 months out of the year that are not very high demand. Maybe it's 3 months that are not very high demand, depending on weather, depending on all sorts of reasons, right? So a very simple example is if you have a property near a beach, when it gets cold, people don't really travel there. But during the beach, warmer weather months, you're going to get most of your revenue then, and then you might have some quiet months when it's cold, no one's traveling there. Well, what most hosts will do is not be able to make money in those months. But what you and I are going to do is understand that there's something called the hybrid B&B model. And what that is you can list your property on a midterm rental site and also other mechanisms that allow you to get 1, 2, or 3 month stays when everyone else is not able to make money. So here's the key. And by the way, that 2 to 3 months is what separates you from everybody else. So I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say this is the year, right? So this is January and this is December. Let's say this is June, right? And let's say for this whole period, you're able to make, let's say your rent is $4,000 a month. And, okay. And during this period, let's say you're able to make $7,000 a month on Airbnb. So during all of these periods, you're making $7,000 a month. So that leaves you $3,000 a month in profit for all of this period here, right? But then in these last 4 months, let's say, you drop down to maybe only $4,000 a month, okay? Or even less, okay? So what are you going to do here? All the other hosts are going to be struggling, but what you're going to do is you're going to have listed your property on Furnished Finder. So look, let's say these 4 months, when everyone else is only making $4K a month, you're going to list your property on a midterm rental site called Furnished Finder. And let me just share with you what that looks like. Furnished Finder. Furnished Finder is where people want to stay 1 to even 6 months stays by different workers. They're coming for work, insurance claims, and I'll explain what these are. And by the way, I'm going to share just this one site with you, but there's other sites where you can find these, especially insurance claims that, again, if you want to work with me, and I got to leave something for my students, right? That you're going to build relationships and have those deal flows coming into you, those guests, those clients coming once you do that. But Furnished Finder is an amazing way for you to get a lot of these clients. And these are people coming in to town for work for 1, 2, 3 months at a time. And they're going to pay you not as much as a short-term rental, but not as little as a long-term rental. And I'm going to explain to you exactly how that works. Same thing with insurance claims, which are big, by the way. Insurance claims are also individuals where, God forbid, something happens to their house and they need to be relocated. So the insurance company will find them an equivalent home and they're going to cover that expense for them. And they pay you as the host directly. Okay? So you're solving a great problem for that family and insurance is going to compensate you. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, do you realize how big this is, by the way, guys? Most hosts do not do this. They don't know how to do it and they have not heard about this. And they don't know how to kind of project their cash flow and understand you don't want to do that in your peak season. You want to maximize your income in your peak season on short-term rental side. And then you also want to use this as a buffer when you're in a slower season, okay? So let's say on a short-term basis, short-term rental, you're charging, let's say, $8,000 a month. And on a long-term basis, long-term rental, you'd only be able to charge $4,000 a month, okay? With a midterm rental, you'd be able to charge somewhere in the middle, okay? So not $4,000 a month, but they're only staying 1, 2, 3 months. You'd be able to charge somewhere around $6,000 a month. So look how powerful this is, guys. In a slower season, when all the other short-term rental hosts are struggling to even break even or barely make a profit, you're able to make a very healthy profit because you tapped into midterm rentals. And by the way, you don't have the churn. You don't have to do the cleanings every weekend. You don't have all of that operations side behind it, you really just set it and forget it for 1, 2, or 3 months. And typically it's just people that are coming for work. So they're kind of in and out, they're professional, less rowdy sometimes, right? And then you're getting able to charge more than what you'd be charging for a long-term rental, because of course you've got your expenses, you've got your mortgage, or you've got your rent. Midterm rentals are the nice midpoint for you to make great profit and also buffer out your cash flow. So make sure you understand how powerful this is, guys. This is the name of the game in 2026. You heard it here first. This is exactly how to do it. So you don't need to just walk away from short-term rentals then. You don't need to go into long-term rentals, and you don't need to go fully into midterm rentals, because you can still make the most cash flow with short-term rentals. And then second, right beneath that, is midterm rentals. Long-term rentals, you're not going to build that big cash flow machine. So this is the best of both worlds right here. And I just gave you one. There's other ways for you to get insurance claims and build those relationships. So again, if you want to learn how to do exactly that, click the link in my description. You can apply to see if you qualify to work with me. And I'd love to help you implement this strategy in detail so that you're booked year round. And especially for those midterm rental dates, you're just booked solid for 1 to 2 to 3 months, maybe even longer. Okay. And I've done exactly this with my properties, and it's worked amazing. All right. So this is our edge in this exact model, the HybridBNB model. This is exactly how you are going to approach Airbnb if you want to succeed. All the other steps come into play, all of them, right? You still need to make sure you did the best property research, the best market research, and really that's number one, making sure you get into the right property and you avoid any property that isn't good. That is exactly how you are going to dominate. All the amenities, all of these different components coming together, all of the different platforms, and understanding how to manage your cash flow depending on the seasonality, you will still build an amazing short-term rental business. And this is exactly how I've been able to achieve the success that I have and continue growing and building out using this strategy. So make sure you implement this. And for those of you that want to learn exactly how to do that, feel free to click the link in the description. And for the rest of you, I hope this was helpful. Like, comment, and subscribe if you got value. I'd love for you to watch the rest of the channel and continue learning how you can completely change your life with short-term rentals and build an amazing business. Be great.